You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 27th of April 2026 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Live from London, this is The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. A very warm welcome to today's programme. Coming up, has Iran made a new proposal to Washington? Reports suggest opening the Strait of Hormuz, but postponing nuclear talks are on the cards. We'll examine the latest reports. Also ahead in the next 60 minutes.
To circumvent these sanctions, Russia began using what is known as the Shadow Fleet, a clandestine network of vessels that conceal their true ownership.
Finland prepares itself for a maritime catastrophe. We're at the rehearsals for a response exercise to an oil spillage for one of Russia's shadow fleet in the Baltic Sea. Plus the papers, the latest art and culture news, and an interview with Angelique Kidjo, the so-called queen of African music. That's all ahead on The Globalist, live from London. First, to look at what else is happening in today's news. The commander of Ukraine's drone forces says his troops are killing as many Russian soldiers a month as Moscow can mobilise. Mali's defence minister has been killed in a suicide bombing at his residence near to the capital Bamako, and the man accused of storming a gala dinner to attack President Trump will appear in court later on. Stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on these stories. But first, it's been suggested that Iran has made a new proposal to Washington, focusing on opening the Strait of Hormuz and postponing nuclear talks in return. Hopes for a fresh round of negotiations between the US and Iran faltered this weekend as President Trump cancelled a planned trip by US negotiators to Islamabad. Mr. Trump said he wasn't going to send his envoys to talk about nothing. Meanwhile, the Iranian foreign minister has arrived in St. Petersburg for talks with the Russian President, Vladimir Putin. So to go through the weekend's events and also to touch on what is happening in Lebanon, let's hear now from Laura James, who's Deputy Director of Analysis and Senior Middle East Analyst at Oxford Analytica, and by Leila Malana Allen, who's Monocle's Middle East correspondent. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Laura, if I may begin with you, do we know what went wrong over the weekend in terms of the talks were happening, the talks were not happening? Because despite not sending anyone over to Islamabad from the American side, the Iranian foreign minister went back to the Pakistani capital.
The Iranian foreign minister went back, but Iran was explicitly saying all the time that they were not going to meet US representatives. So he went back, presumably to deliver this proposal. But in Tehran's view, I think they weren't yet ready for a direct meeting. And so a lot of what went on over the weekend was just smoke and mirrors about the idea that the US envoys would go at all was slightly odd all the time. No one really expected there to be talks yet, because Iran certainly wasn't ready to sit down and offer major concessions. And now we have the reports that this proposal was delivered. It's not completely clear that the content we've heard about is correct, but the source is one that's generally reliable. The question now, I suppose, is whether the United States is prepared to accept an end to the blockade of Iran, the oil blockade, and an end to the effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz as a deal.
And Leila, there's no sign of either of those happening, is there? Because over the weekend, the US military said it had intercepted another merchant vessel of the Shadow Fleet, trying to get through this blockade of Iranian ports.
Exactly right. So essentially, both sides seem to be saying that they want a ceasefire, a permanent one, and a permanent end to this war, but they don't seem to be acting in a way that suggests that on the ground, even though they might be diplomatically. And the issue here essentially seems to be that Iran, this comes from a source inside the US government, but that Iran seems to have offered that essentially there can be an end to the war by them lifting the blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, because they want the US to lift its blockade on Iranian ports, which is starting to affect Iran quite badly. And then they can sort of delay nuclear negotiations to later. The problem is, of course, that the Trump administration isn't really interested in that, because that takes away, if they lift the blockade on the Iranian ports, which does seem to be one of the first things they've done, which is actually putting pressure on the Iranian government. If they lift that blockade and they agree to a full end to the war, essentially they lose their leverage for these kind of two key things that President Trump wants, which are both removing the enriched uranium that Iran has now. There's this stockpile they haven't been able to get to through bombing. And secondly, limiting the capacity for Iran to enrich uranium in the future. Now, President Trump essentially said, we have all the cards. He cancelled this trip for his envoys, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, to go back to Pakistan. He said, I'm not sending them all that way unless it's something really to negotiate, essentially indicating that this offer from Iran isn't enough. Meanwhile, of course, we've got Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister, Iranian foreign minister, going on this sort of diplomatic tour, essentially trying to get other countries on board because to support this idea of a deal, because everybody wants this war to end because, of course, it's having such a huge economic impact.
Laura, just bringing you in on this issue of who has the upper hand here. I mean, Donald Trump saying that he has all the cards. But does anyone here actually have the advantage?
It depends what metric you're using, and that is the thing that really scares me, because I think that both sides still believe they do have the upper hand. It's true that the oil blockade is affecting Iran, and it is the first thing that seriously worried the regime. I think that's also true. But the problem is, I think that President Trump seems to massively overestimate the effect it's having. His understanding seems to be that within a couple of days, Iran will have to shut down operations and that will destroy its reservoirs. And so that this really is a moment when they're going to be forced to deal. Now, that doesn't seem to reflect reality. The blockade isn't absolutely total. Iran has a lot of experience of evasion. It also has experience of shutting down its wells safely. Obviously, that does have some impact on future production. I think it's worth bearing in mind that when this whole crisis started and Iran decided to close the Strait of Hormuz, it must have assumed that its oil would be shot off, and that its loading would be interrupted much more quickly. The really odd thing was that the United States didn't do this straight away. And so I think this is a cost that the Iranian regime has probably factored in. And so in that sense, they still think that they have the upper hand because they can control whether the global economy recovers, whether oil prices and gas prices come down. They are looking at US midterms, what the petrol price is, whether there's a floor in it, how that will affect Trump. And they think that gives them the upper hand because although the economic pain for them is much greater, the feed through from popular economic pain to the regime's position in Iran is much less than it is in the United States.
And Lana, what are the risks of this going unresolved for a long time? I read over the weekend there's the phrase being bandied out around called "no war, no peace."
That's absolutely right. So I think, the question here is essentially what now are both sides looking for? And I think Iran is much more clearly looking for a peace deal. They really do want to bring an end to this. This has had a huge impact inside for civilians as well. And I think internationally, there's a lot of support for the Iranian government now as well. Iran has really come out of this looking significantly better than they went into it. They do seem to be in the grown up most of the time. They are trying to get involved diplomatically, as I said, with all these different leaders. Whereas the Trump administration seems to sort of be looking now at this extended ceasefire. It's almost like they're turning away from this as a main focus and starting to try and focus on internal politics a bit more. And as Laura said there, with the midterms coming up, that's really what they're concerned now. He has the lowest popularity rating since he came to power. It's clear that the American public just doesn't believe at all that this war actually was in their favor and that there was an immediate threat to them. And so they're incredibly angry because they voted for a president who said that he would increase, the value of their money, that would make things easier economically. And of course, they've seen the exact opposite. They've seen a huge rise in certainly petrol prices, but they're starting to see an impact on food prices as well. And of course, we know that this is going to move forward and keep impacting the world. This is now planting season. There's fertilizer struck in the Strait of Hormuz. So this idea of, as you say, no war, no peace, this kind of long-running frozen conflict, another frozen conflict in the world, which will keep having reverberations, is extremely concerning for all the leaders of countries like Oman, like Pakistan. We've even seen Araghchi go to Russia now and really try and get global support, hopefully to make sure that this doesn't stay frozen.
Meanwhile, let's focus finally on Lebanon, Laura. We have reports coming now that I think from the Lebanese Ministry of Health saying that there have been Israeli strikes on Sunday. 14 people have died, including and also 37 other people have been injured as well. The IDF, the Israeli Defence Force, had issued warnings for several villages in southern Lebanon saying that something was going to happen. But the fact remains that this does not look like a ceasefire.
No, and I think the issue is that it never looked like a ceasefire in some ways. The whole way it was set up, being between Israel and the Lebanese government, which is not a party in the conflict, and allowing Israel to react against any perceived threat by Hezbollah without justifying to anybody that threat actually exists or that that the response is proportionate, means that this was always going to be a rather messy situation, and the payoff was only that it might provide an exit strategy at some future point if the Iran conflict was resolved, that it might reduce the intensity of Israeli strikes on places like central Beirut. But that was all this ceasefire was ever going to achieve.
Laura James and Leila Malana Allen, thank you so much for joining me on The Globalist. You're listening to Monocle Radio. As we've just heard, while Iran and the US are staring each other out in the game of no peace, no war, the effects of the continued blockage of the Strait of Hormuz are now beginning to be felt. The aviation industry has unsurprisingly been hit very hard. Lufthansa has begun to cancel flights, saying rising fuel prices are simply making a lot of journeys unprofitable. Well, to give us a wider view, Murdo Morrison, Head of Strategic Content at Flight Global and regular voice here on Monocle Radio, joins me. Good morning, Murdo.
Good morning.
So just begin with a little bit of context. How dependent are the airlines on the Strait of Hormuz as a transit route for their fuel?
Yeah, airlines generally depend on this as a transit route for their fuel. European airlines, especially US airlines, less so. But yes, this is crucial, really. And the longer that this goes on, the more constrained things get for airlines. There has been talk of just a few weeks of fuel left. I think that's probably slight, hyperbole at the moment, but things are certainly getting pretty bad. And what airlines are doing at the moment is cutting back on flights that aren't profitable. So the fuel costs that are, for some airlines twice what they were a few months ago, mean that they just simply cannot afford to operate a lot of the flights that they were doing before. I think for consumers, the other thing that they're going to be noticing is much higher fares.
And so just explain to us the time scale with this one, because we have Lufthansa already saying that fuel prices are making a lot of their journeys unprofitable. They have already started to cut the number of flights they're operating. Are they the canary in the coal mine?
Yes, I mean, other airlines have done this as well. KLM have cancelled flights. Most European airlines have talked about, if not cancelling flights, then certainly the potential of them having to do this. And remember that in the Northern Hemisphere, which is the majority of the airline market, we're now approaching the very, very busy summer season. So that's where I think the crunch is really going to come in a couple of months if this hasn't been resolved. And even if it is resolved, it'll take a long time to sort out. But as we approach summer, they're really that's really when airlines are going to start to feel the pressure.
So, what is it going to look like in terms of our timetables and our ability to travel, not just around Europe but globally?
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult to tell. The situation changes every day. We could see talks resume and everything get resolved. I think it will. Even if that happens, best case scenario, it still will take a lot of time for fuel supplies to get back to normal. But if this continues for several more months into the summer season, which is very, very possible, I think we will see cancelled flights. I think the price to the consumer of the flights that are flying will get much higher. And I think for airlines, they will really see the impact on their bottom line. Whether we'll see massive structural changes in sort of whole-scale cancellations of flights, a sort of COVID type situation is very, very unlikely at this stage. But I think we will certainly see a significant impact if this is not resolved by the time we hit that sort of early summer season in June.
So let's look at how we get ourselves out of this mess. One of the options is to have mandatory jet fuel sharing. What does that mean and how would it work?
Well, that's a really difficult one to implement. I think some of these measures that have been talked about, there's a real limited amount that governments can do, and most governments have talked about, stopping airlines. They're trying to stop airlines cancelling routes if they can. They're looking at subsidising fuel. They can cut things like VAT on fuel. Airports have talked about perhaps reducing charges for airlines. So there is some tinkering around the edges that can happen. Sharing jet fuel, I'm not sure. I mean, there's only so much jet fuel to go around. So I'm not, you're sharing a limited resource, even if that was sort of logistically possible to do.
Finally, Murdo, is anyone actually just making money out of all this?
Well, it's certainly not the airlines. I mean, the one good thing for some airlines in Europe is because of, and this has nothing to do with the cost of fuel, but because of the disruption to the operations of the Middle Eastern airlines, the Gulf airlines, Emirates and Etihad and Qatar Airways, a lot of passengers turn to European carriers for flying to Asia, and that's benefited. We've seen Finnair, for example, come out with results that have shown that sort of that uptick in the Asian market for them. But other than that, it's pretty grim for right across the industry for airlines.
Murdo Morrison, thank you for that warning. Still to come on today's programme.
What this album is about, I think that it's a proof. Even when we don't know each other, we can still work together.
We hear from the so-called queen of African music, the musician Angelique Kidjo, who's got a new album out. Stay tuned to The Globalist.
Craft is a matter of perspective, a unique outlook, an obsessive attention to detail. With UBS's Chief Investment Office Houseview, we're focused on identifying the latest investment opportunities and market risks to help you achieve your financial goals, so you get the big picture broken down into thought-provoking insights. Delivered daily and curated by over 200 globally connected, locally active analysts. UBS. Banking is our craft.
7:18 here in London. Time to have a look at the newspapers. Joining me in the studio, Robin Brandt, former BBC presenter and correspondent in China and the United States. Good morning.
Good morning.
Robin. How are we?
Good, yeah, fairly perky. It's lovely and bright outside here in the heart of London.
Excellent. Yes, we've just heard Murdo Morrison from Flight Global surrounded by birds. There was a bit of an irony there. Right, let's talk about what's in the papers. What have you spotted?
Well, look, obviously there is infinite reporting on the events at the Hilton in Washington, D.C. On Saturday with that attempt on the president and various members of the cabinet. I wanted to look briefly at the local paper, the Washington Post. Maura Judkis is a reporter that writes for the Style section and not someone used to doing, extensive political analysis. But there's a piece that she writes, and there's a lot of the kind of first-person stuff around, I was in the room when. But hers really caught my attention because you go to the Post in particular when these things tend to happen and you get that distinct take on it from people that live within the district. And she writes this great piece. She talks about being there, being on a rubbish table. Usually, it's the worst seat in the room, but on this night it was a great place to have that kind of perspective. She talks about dinner. They started with a salad. Everyone was expecting, a lot of anticipation about the president's appearance the first time in 15 years. She didn't have to show any ID when she walked in, so you get that nice sense of what was going on as well at the Hilton. And it is a bit of a kind of a mad occasion because it's semi-chaotic outside, very controlled inside and around the ballroom, but outside normal guests, protests, people staying at the hotel who got nothing to do with the correspondents' dinner. But then she talks about, the moment when someone cried shoot her under the table, 10 minutes, she's messaging on WhatsApp in her group. Everyone starts reporting. That's what reporters do. They instinctively just report.
This is it. We've got a room full of journalists.
Yeah, and she's on the floor for 10 minutes. She can see some bread rolls. She describes, kind of mild chaos, but then silence. And then they kind of rise to their feet after a while, not quite knowing what's going on. All the important people are gone. And then reporters start reporting, filing copy on their phones. The video journalists, their friend holds a phone. They do the kind of self-shooted kind of stuff that they file immediately. And then someone says, the night's still on, dinner's still on, someone's eating a salad, someone's reaching for wine. Of course, that didn't happen. But what I really like about this piece, that it's the person that doesn't usually do this kind of stuff, but we're reminded that in their heart, they're all still reporters. And you get this great combination of the scene, what she can see, what it feels like, the anticipation, and then, of course, the moment.
It is excellent. It's a very, very, very good article. And the best bit for me is exactly that bit that you highlighted, that after all the pandemonium, at 9:25, they were told to sit down again because dinner would begin, and there was a smattering of applause, which is what journalists do. There's a free meal.
Yeah,
they're going to stick around.
And when there's other reporting, some other American papers about people who aren't there journalistically. There's a lot of corporate guests. It's a big corporate night. The Washington Post, other outlets, they invite their people. But there's a description of one guy staying at his table, didn't go onto the floor, just eating a salad because, of course, he doesn't really have a role to fulfill. He's not a reporter. He's not the security. He's not with the administration. Just goes on with dinner.
Brilliant. It's a really good article. I recommend everybody to do that. It's in the Washington Post, ladies and gentlemen. Right, let's move to the South China Morning Post. Another story that you wanted to do to sort of do justice to. This is China and Myanmar.
Yeah, and you're right. I like that description, doing justice, because this is a problem that's been going on in Myanmar for a long time. And it's on a scale that I think lots of us here kind of fail to recognise. It's scamming, telecom scams, romance scams by thousands of very often Chinese people who are trafficked over the border into Myanmar. It's all run by organised crime, often in cahoots with military figures close to the junta in Myanmar. And these are people, tens of thousands on a daily basis, scamming Chinese people across the border in their homeland. And it's a kind of a hellish scene of not just criminality, but of this kind of pathetic existence. These people who are trafficked over, they're involved in criminality day to day, targeting Chinese people across the border. These are romance scams. These are finance scams. The Chinese government hates it. Aside from the obvious, there's a consumer crime story here, but it also points to the kind of porous borders. And that for the Chinese government is something that is a particular affront. And this year in particular, the last 12 months, we've seen a real focus both diplomatically, but also in terms of China's criminal justice system to bring thousands of these people back. And it is thousands. Thousands have been repatriated. We get these scenes of them being paraded, coming off planes, brought back from Myanmar across to China. Some of the leaders have been executed. And so the last 12 months, we've seen a real focus. Wang Yi, China's foreign minister, has wrapped up a tour of Southeast Asia, including Myanmar recently. They continue to focus on it because it really is on a scale that lots of us kind of find incomprehensible.
It's interesting because the article places it within a very, very big international geopolitical context, doesn't it? It's not just the sorting out of this this telecom scandal, but the fact that China is Myanmar's biggest trading partner and they are so interconnected.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, Myanmar relies on China, as you said, for a huge amount of its own export, but there was a huge amount of investment coming in across the Chinese border in oil, in other infrastructure, and frankly, let's not pretend here that there aren't elements within China, whether that's provincial government or beyond, involved in more nefarious activities with the Myanmar authorities. There's a huge drug problem as well in terms of that border. There are issues with gambling as well. So, this is one particular thing that you often find in my time in China. The government would be very focused on these kind of issues that were of concern to almost like a consumer kind of affairs almost. Something that was an affront to Chinese people, was targeting Chinese people in particular. You would find the Chinese government government would really focus on and would make it a big issue in terms of its relationship with a neighbour. But you're right. When it comes to other areas of investment in particular and other activities, Myanmar's reliance on China is immense.
Let's move on to an article in The Citizen from South Africa, I think. South Africa's communication minister urged to withdraw AI policy after fake reports and inaccuracies cited due to AI use. Guess what? AI is unreliable.
Have a guess what's happened here.
Fill us in, Robin.
Over the last 2 years, South Africa's government,
literally
led by
typing on the wall.
and Solly Malatsi, the communications minister, have been devising a all-encompassing, detailed AI policy for the government to adopt across the whole country. It was finally published earlier this month, very detailed, 67 footnotes and references at the bottom. And a news organisation called News 24 reported in the Citizen has discovered that some of those elements were made up. They were fake. Some of the research was faked. Some of the details that have been cited were never, ever published. So yet again, another example of a phenomenon that we know about, but we are reminded in the most ironic of incidences here of the hallucination elements within AI, and particularly the more larger, sophisticated large language machines. And so the South African government have come forward with this new AI policy, which has now been withdrawn because parts of it were clearly used or were clearly formulated using AI. We don't know which one, but parts of it simply were just not real.
I love the fact that News 24 has checked the communications department's homework.
Yeah. I mean, and I wonder, and let me have a guess at how that was done. Much of the policing of all AI is done using, of course, other AI and other algorithmic machines. I mean, this is done at schools or education institutions to check there isn't kind of plagiarism. But I mean, look, this is a classic. You could not make it up.
Let's finally head to the Netherlands, where it is King's Day.
Koningsdag. I'm fluent Dutch there. And listen, when you search this on your phone, I admit to doing it a bit yesterday. If you Google King's Day, your phone goes all orange. I mean, it all drops down across the whole phone. Google it and other search engines are available, are fully into Koningsday. So if you want to check that out, do that this morning.
What is it? And we have to not drink as much as we'd probably like to. Is that the thing?
This is what really got my attention. It's the annual celebration of the monarchy. At the moment, it's Willem-Alexander. It's a day off. It's a national holiday. There are flea markets, I'm told, across the whole country. There's much urgency and much significance placed on getting your place, getting your blanket down, selling the old, clearing out the house. It's a national celebration. There are rules in place about what boats can go where. But what really caught my attention was the rules around alcohol consumption. Look, it sounds like it's a very boozy day. I suspect the weather's going to be just as nice across the Netherlands as it is here today in London. But there are restrictions. I'm not quite sure how this is policed, but you're only supposed to have one alcoholic drink on you at any given time. You're not supposed to have more than one on you. This isn't about consuming one in a day, consuming one in an hour, but between the two of us, we're only supposed to have one can of whatever on us when the cops come calling in the middle of a day.
Now, you mentioned can. Does it actually specify how big that drink may be?
Well, interestingly, in some of the reporting, it does say that a keg doesn't count, or a six-pack doesn't count. I mean, they've seen straight through that. But clearly there are issues around what you might describe as overconsumption. But I love the idea that it's a kind of a dynamic piece of law enforcement, only one at a time, one on you at any particular given time.
And off we go to the flea market afterwards.
Well, I think flea market first.
Flea market first.
So you're kind of conscious of what you're buying, then on to the booze.
You don't come back with the inflatable penguin.
No.
Robin Brent, thank you so much for joining me in the studio. Robin is a former BBC presenter and correspondent in China and the US, but he's done our paper review today. You're listening to The Globalist. Now a quick look at some of the other stories we're keeping an eye on today. The commander of Ukraine's drone forces says his troops are killing as many Russian soldiers a month as Moscow can mobilise. Robert Brovdy said about 30,000 men a month were being killed, with each death captured on a drone camera, verified and logged. Mali's defence minister has been killed in a suicide bombing at his residence near to the capital Bamako. His death comes during a wave of coordinated attacks by jihadist militants and Tuareg separatists. Two of Benjamin Netanyahu's most formidable political rivals have joined forces in a bid to oust Israel's governing coalition in this year's elections. The right-winger Naftali Bennett and the centrist Yair Lapid made the announcement at a joint news conference. And the man accused of storming a gala dinner to attack President Trump appears in court later. 31-year-old Cole Allen from Los Angeles will be charged with assaulting a federal officer and using a firearm during a violent crime. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. We head now to Finland, where authorities are preparing for the possibility of a large-scale oil spill involving so-called flat shadow fleet tankers that continue exporting Russian oil despite Western sanctions. A newly unveiled preemptive project will see NGOs and state authorities install a permanent fastening system for oil spill response booms along Finland's coastline. Our correspondent in the Finnish capital, Helsinki, Petri Bertsov, has more.
The Baltic Sea is one of the world's most heavily trafficked waterways. Every day, thousands of vessels in all shapes and sizes sail its waters. Its rugged coastline is scattered with thousands of islands and is infamously difficult to navigate, even for experienced seafarers. When Western powers imposed sanctions on Russia following its illegal invasion of Ukraine, it became increasingly difficult for the country to export goods such as oil from its main port city of St. Petersburg, which sits at the eastern end of the Gulf of Finland. To circumvent these sanctions, Russia began using what is known as the Shadow Fleet, a clandestine network of vessels, often aging tankers, that conceal their true ownership and destination. These ships have helped Russia continue exporting oil via the Baltic Sea. Today, nearly half of Russia's seaborne oil exports pass through them. In addition to helping fund Russia's war in Ukraine, these ships come with other risks too. Many are in poor condition, lack modern navigation equipment, and are crewed by sailors unfamiliar with the challenging conditions of the Baltic Sea. What is more, in recent weeks, the oil ports of Primorsk and Ust-Luga near the Finnish border have reportedly been targeted in drone attacks.
There was a devastating Ukrainian drone strike on Russia's second largest oil refinery. The blaze halted production, putting more pressure on the country's already strained oil infrastructure. Kyiv attacked an oil and gas terminal at a port on the Baltic Sea near Finland overnight. Workers capturing this video of the drone attack. Ukraine's security agency says
all of this has significantly increased the risk of an oil spill in the region, especially in the Gulf of Finland and the waters around St. Petersburg. According to the Finnish border guard, Shadow Fleet vessels have been involved in dozens of close calls in the area every year since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began.
How many close calls have there been? First of all, there should not be any. Every close call is a potential risk for a large-scale accident, but there have been dozens of them.
To prepare for a potential disaster, Finnish authorities, together with the maritime protection NGO John Nurminen Foundation, have launched a preemptive project to install a permanent fastening system for oil spill response booms in the archipelago of the eastern Gulf of Finland. In practice, this means mooring rings bolted into the bedrock of the archipelago, allowing emergency crews to quickly attach floating containment booms in the event of an accident.
By attaching these rings in set locations in the archipelago, we can react to oil spills faster.
The aim is simple: to trap the oil before it reaches the inhabited coastline and the Baltic's fragile marine ecosystem. The Finnish border guard is also receiving new vessels and surveillance aircraft to improve its ability to monitor and respond to potential catastrophes. The stakes are extraordinarily high. From where I live, in Helsinki, on a clear day, I can see dozens of tankers passing through the narrow stretch of sea between Helsinki and the Estonian capital Tallinn. More ships move through these waters than through the Strait of Hormuz before the outbreak of the Iran conflict. These tankers can carry anything from a few thousand tons to more than 100,000 tons of oil. According to academic studies, a major spill could contaminate up to 185 kilometers of Finland's coastline. My hometown of Helsinki, a city of around 700,000 people, would be among the hardest hit. The consequences would be catastrophic. Long-term damage to marine life, tourism, fisheries and public health in one of Europe's most environmentally sensitive seas. And while the oil continues to flow, Finnish authorities are preparing for the possibility that it is no longer a question of if a major accident will happen in the Baltic Sea, but when. For Monocle in Helsinki, I'm Petri Burtsov.
Thank you, Petri. You're listening to The Globalist on Monocle Radio. It's 8:34 a.m, which is where we head now to Berlin. It's a big night in the design world. The leading figures are heading to Berlin for the IF Design Award. It's estimated that more than 10,000 entries are submitted, making it one of the world's largest design competitions. In Berlin, Tim Abrams, contributing editor to the Architectural Record. Good morning, Tim. How's Berlin looking this morning?
Good morning, Emma. It's looking very spring-like and cheery, I'll be pleased to report.
Delighted to hear it. So the IF Design Awards have been going since, 1954? So this is a very big deal indeed, isn't it?
It is. Initially, it was begun as a means of regenerating German industry, product design after the war. An influx of American products was showing that Europe needed to up its game if it was to create its own industry. So the Germans took it upon themselves to create an award for themselves. But it internationalized very quickly and became a pan-European an award. By the end of the 50s, early 60s, it was already acknowledging the contribution of Olivetti to product design and Scandinavian furniture design. It was the first to acknowledge that. So generating and creating a pan-European market, but also communicating and evaluating and updating what makes good design, a place for that to be discussed.
So in 2026, what does that look like?
In 2026, it looks an awful lot more global than this small European award. There are over 100 designers here from Brazil alone. There are over 1,000 awards being created. There's a graded one with gold awards being the top, but there's over 1,000 of those awards being given to product design for and different types of design from China. Also, the proliferation of different types of design. It was very much always a product design award, but now we have things being awarded for UXP, user experience, but also user interface design. I've been looking at what the difference between those are, still not quite sure. But also product design again, but also service design, which is the designing of a company's outputs and organization by designers, but also architecture, interior design, and landscape design as well. So it's both more globalized, but also representing in its 91 categories the huge proliferation of design across different categories today.
91 categories, that sounds like a very long evening. How does that get done crisply, efficiently and enjoyably?
Well, it's done by Germans, so you can imagine that's a good start. Also, only the gold awards get awarded this evening. One of the things that the IF Design have done is become very good at thinking about its global profile under its CEO Uwe Kremering, who's been in post for 5 years now. Initially, the event was held in Hanover, not to diss Hanover. It was moved to Berlin in 2022. And it's become much more of a draw to people from around the world. So the great and the good are here, all dressed up to the nines. Some of them looking slightly jaded, it must be said, after a week in Milan. But the thing about Milan is that you come to the end of it, the Salone, this is the furniture trade fair, but also expanding as all design events have. You tend to get to the end of it and think, maybe there's too much design. But when you come to IF design, you think, actually, by the end of it, there's not enough design, because this is a way of looking at products dealing with manufacture and I've been looking across some of the entries, and it's incredible that new medical devices, which need to be easily operable in stressful conditions, and you see the way designers have been dealing with that. Then you look across it, all across it. The thing that I was most taken with was a series of baby formula preparation machines from Tommy Tippy, the cup manufacturer. I thought, I wish I'd had one of those in the early days of my children's life. There's all kinds of things you see in which designers are improving and bettering. Autonomous mobile robots for warehouses, a lot of air treatment devices, dehumidifiers and ionizers and so on. I was told that when the judging panel met they brought together all the products into one space in Hanover, and it was 13 million euros of products were held in one space at one time. So it's very much a place where you see design operating in concert with industry to improve, to up games, to make things better.
Which all sounds absolutely wonderful. Now, you mentioned that the big the big baby brand Tommy Tippy, and also I think one of the winners this year is Honda. It's won for its first full-size electric motorcycle. Obviously, really, solving the world's problems as we go along and doing them in a very, very stylish way. But the fact remains is the names that we have referred to are big names. Is this a design award ceremony just for the big guns, or are there those small and brilliant designers out there who are actually getting the opportunity to have a little bit of warm sunlight shone upon them?
Absolutely. I think actually it's quite it's an area where the awards perhaps have neglected slightly, but being here and the people you meet, it's very clear that this award plays a huge part in the development of careers of designers. I was speaking to Rick Weisenborn, who's an ex-snowboarder, and he's an inventor and founder who makes tools for maintaining the edges of snowboards and skis. Very niche. He's based in Calgary in Canada. There isn't really much of a design community there, but he now exports around the world because he reached out to IF Design. They found the right judging panel for him to be selected in, and his awards were nominated and won. And he's now working with producers all around the world, Japan and all over Europe. And he says that it just enabled him, as he describes himself as a mad inventor, to reach a wider public. I spoke to an amazing landscape architect called Rodrigo Oliveira, who it works in a long tradition of fantastic landscape architecture going back to Bill Marx in Brazil, and he's become very successful in his country, but looked to the designs to internationalize. And as part of that process, he's now working. He's getting commissions in the Middle East and in Europe, all kinds of things. It's basically because of its relationship to industry, and industry looks to it as a benchmark, as well as a recognition of their own contribution. But it's serious. I mean, the design in Milan that we see is very often very inspirational, but it doesn't necessarily reflect an ongoing ability to produce and distribute around the world, whereas the IF Design Award is very much of that.
And finally, Tim, of the 91 categories, which is the one that's caught your eye?
The landscape architecture has been one. There's another brilliant young architect, landscape designer, product designer called Alexandra Prass, who's developed this wonderful hexagonal interlocking concrete paving system, which he won his 4th award for. And interestingly, he met the producer, although the producer is also Brazilian. He met him at the first time he won an award in 2023. So it shows the kind of circularity of the awards and the way in which it brings designers closer to industry and industry closer to designers.
Tim Abrams, clearly having fun in Berlin. Thank you so much for joining us on the line. You're listening to Monocle Radio.
IQ, EQ, and AI. 3 components key to the craft of innovation at UBS. Because to stay ahead in a rapidly evolving age, you need a partner with decades of experience, endless passion for the work, and a finger on the pulse of leading technologies, bridging human expertise with artificial intelligence, all to elevate you. UBS, banking is our craft.
We just had design, and that's all happening in Berlin. Let's head to Italy now for the latest art news. Anna Vukardian is an arts and culture writer. She joins us from Marche in Italy at the moment. Good morning, Anna. How's it looking where you are?
It's wonderful weather, very sunny, very kind of Italian spring day.
Excellent.
How about you?
No. Right, let's talk about the Venice Biennale. I mean, this is the great biennale in the world. This is the thing where everybody gets terribly excited. So we, a moment ago, talking to Tim Abrams, all the design world getting terribly excited in Berlin. What are the Venetians going for this year?
Yes, so the Venice Biennale is, like you said, the most prestigious, and it's the largest contemporary art event in the world. It's now in its 61st edition, and it's sort of the Biennale is the mother of all biennales. It opens to the public on the 9th of May, and it's preceded by this very coveted, very packed preview week, which starts on the 5th of May, next Tuesday, where essentially anyone who's anyone in the art world will descend to Venice and decamp there. And so what we have is the Biennale is typically divided into two parts. There's the main international exhibition, which is in the Giardini, and it was conceived by the late Cameroonian Swiss curator Koyo Kuo, who sadly died unexpectedly last May, but her vision for the exhibition was carried out by her curatorial team. And then the second part of the Biennale are the national pavilions, which are spread across the Giardini and the Arsenale. And then there's also numerous official and non-official collateral events that will pop up in gorgeous locations all over the city. This year, we are up to 99 national pavilions. So the concept of national pavilions is invariably political, as you would imagine, especially now that we're seeing sort of the highest amount of armed conflicts globally since the Second World War. Russia announced that it's back in its space in the Giardini, upsetting very much and very specifically the European political establishment, while Israel's pavilion, which is usually in the Giardini, is closed for renovation, but the Biennale organizers found a space for it in the Arsenale, and this drew the ire of many protesting artists and art workers in their thousands. So the result of this was a statement was published last Thursday by the jurors for the Golden and Silver Lion Awards from the Venice Biennale, who essentially said they will not consider the pavilions of any country whose leaders are currently charged with crimes against humanity by the International Criminal Court. So this would, of course, include Russia and Israel. And then this statement was quickly followed by news that the European Union is protesting Russia's participation by officially withdrawing 2 million euros of funding from the Venice Biennale, and this will affect the next edition. So there's been a lot of, interesting news swirling around anticipation of the Biennale.
Indeed. And what we have here is this very delicate and diplomatic fusion of politics and art, because we have, as you said, the jury of the Biennale is saying it's not giving awards to artists from countries whose leaders are facing charges of crimes against humanity. But it does not explicitly mention Russia or Israel. So they're having to tread a very, very, very careful line. And also, you're talking about Koyo Kuo, who's a Swiss Cameroonian curator who died. Her vision was absolutely the defence of human rights. So this is something that the Biennale really has to be careful with.
Yeah, and exactly. And most of them, many artists in the actual main exhibition are the ones who wrote the letter kind of protesting the presence of Israel as well this year. So it will be, they have a very difficult job in kind of maintaining a balance. And also the other tricky part is that essentially the countries sort of own these, some of the countries like Israel and Russia own their spaces in the Giardini. So essentially it means it's kind of like a real estate. So the Biennale has difficulty blocking them and accessing these spaces. So it'll be interesting even to see how the foundation responds to the EU cutting their funding.
Okay, let's talk about David Geffen galleries.
Yes, exactly. So this was 2 decades in the making. So it's part of Los Angeles County Museum of Art, LACMA's new 724 million David Geffen galleries, which open to the public next week. They've been, as I said, 2 decades in the making. And the museum's permanent collection will return to public view after 7 years. It includes over 160,000 objects, and it spans over 6,000 years. So it's very much a museum of everything, as Michael Govan has called it. And the new building adds 110 square feet to LACMA. It's a super important moment for the art world, because essentially the David Geffen galleries are seeking to reinvent what an encyclopedic museum means in this present day and age and what it looks like. So the new building is kind of all undulating concrete and glass. It's elevated above the street, and it's all in a single level, which is designed to encourage movement across cultures and time periods rather than along this very sort of fixed Western kind of chronological route. And very interestingly, the works are grouped in relation to major bodies of water. So there's like the Pacific, Indian, and Atlantic Oceans, and the Mediterranean Sea. So it will be really interesting to see how this design will, how it will impact other museums around the world. And so far, it's been largely rave reviews. So I'm very excited to see it.
Good. It's taken a while, and now it's here.
It has.
Finally, we have to touch on, and I'm not using that as a pun, given what we're just about to talk about. But there was a lady in Italy, in Florence, in the Piazza della Signoria, which is the big tourist thing. It was before her wedding. She did something rather silly, didn't she?
Yes. So she tried to climb onto the 16th century marble statue of Neptune to touch his genitals in a wedding, sort of a pre-wedding challenge. And of course, she was caught. And essentially, she caused 5,000 euros in damage. The experts from the council inspected the monument and found that by trying to climb up onto the statue, she damaged both legs of the horses, and she also damaged the frieze that she'd clung onto as well. So, of course, this has thoroughly annoyed many Italians, not to mention the city council. And it's just a bigger problem that European leaders are having in general. They're at a loss on how to defend these very kind of critical, important sites against over-tourism and these increasingly dangerous, very silly stunts for photo ops or, social media moments.
And indeed, and apparently this is now becoming a thing that that people are climbing landmarks all over the world, and in particular in Italy, as part of stunts. This is becoming a bit too popular and a bit too attractive an idea.
Exactly. I think one of the most absurd ones was an old man last year driving his car onto the Spanish Steps in Rome, which was an insane sight to see. It was sort of like 4 a.m. in the morning. He drove his Mercedes down the Spanish Steps. So yes, it's always pretty insane what tourists might do.
Anna Vucadin, you'd never do that. Arts and culture writer joining us on the line from Marche in Italy. Thank you so much for joining us on Monocle Radio. You're with The Globalist. Now, the Beninese singer Angelique Kidjo is back with a new album called Hope. It's out this week, and the influential artist, sometimes referred to as a queen of African music, stopped by Midori House to talk to Monocle Radio's senior correspondent Fernanda Augusta Pacheco. They began by talking about the collaborators on her new album.
My body now, Egovina, fire killer, pretty like Sabina. Are you coming back or what? Are you coming back or
what this album is about? I think that it's a proof. Even when we don't know each other, we can still work together. You don't have to know somebody for 10 years before you click and say something is here. Let's look at what it is. How can we make this something that get people to understand that sparkle happens? Love is still there. But endless possibility that we have at our fingertips. And no matter the telephone, no matter the network, it's social, all those things, they're there. But nothing is more powerful than when you connect humanly with somebody and create something that is bigger than you.
And Angelique, sorry, as a Brazilian, I must ask about the Isa collaboration and Nile Rodgers. I mean, come on. But then, we spoke a little bit before the interview started. You have quite a strong connection with Brazil.
Brazil is in my blood because from my mother's father's side, The lineage comes from Salvador de Bahia. My mom's maiden name is Fernando. Wow. And I grew up in the Creole of the descendant of slaves that came back. And we call them Aguda. And every year we do something that's called Bunia, which is the equivalent of Carnival. So you have masked people on it. I grew up in that, and I was always mesmerized by that. And I always say to myself, I need to go to this place where my ancestors come from because it's too much fun. The fun is different from other fun that I see in my country. And my
it's very liberating.
It is. Right? It's very. It is just like. Because as a child, my nickname was When, Why, How. I asked so much questions. I was so curious. And something that gives me joy, I wanted more and more. And I'll be talking about it all the time. So I met Isa a couple of years back and we talked. And then I met her also. I have a friend called Zé Ricardo. And I was in Rio. And then he bring me a lot of artists. I mean, movie actors and the creme of the creme of Brazilian artists, and Isa was one of them. And I like the way I love everything about what she does because she has so much power and she's different. People that doesn't think of Brazil as a big, huge place. They don't understand that the Brazilian music is bigger than it's big. I mean, every artist is different. Each one of them is unique. And that's how artistically and musically that country is massive. So I wrote this song with Nile Roger, Philip Sess, who is a friend of mine that is a piano player, a prodigy piano player. And then I said, I need Brazil in this. This song deserves Brazil. I mean, this song is gonna trio electrical, whatever it is, man. This is just like you come to the carnival, that's what I want. And I can't do this without getting the real person, one of the real person that knows what it means to be in the trio electrical, to sing this. So I sent it to her and she was like, I just give birth to my baby, give me some time. I said, take your time. Don't worry about it. Take care of your little one. Just take your time. And then she came up with all that thing. It's just like, you know what I mean? And now Roger, when he listened to it, he said, okay, let's go. I said, okay, we're here. We're going to go for it. We're going to do it.
You mentioned carnival, but it's funny, if you put the album on a carnival party, I think it would work because it is energetic. It is pumping,
That's what the way also to celebrate my mom's heritage.
Yes, she deserved that.
She deserved that. I mean, my mom, you bring my mom to a party, you gotta be ready. You gotta have a siesta before. Because when we used to, I used to go to club with my mom. Every time I come in the 90s, when I go back there, she said, let's go to a nightclub. I say, Mom, what's wrong with you? We all gonna go there. She's gonna be the last one to leave. The DJ go, Mom, Kijo, take the key. You close it, you know where to put it. And we are all on the couch like, Mom, let's go. Mama said, no, come on, look at you. You are young. I'm like, my father will never come. My father said, I know you're your mother. You don't understand. That woman have too much energy for me. So all those things that I cannot express, I just put it in the music. It's like my mom is following. My mom is having fun right now with that, wherever she is. So Carnival is all my mama.
I'm wondering here, because I know you'll be performing, in quite a few places this year. How are you going to showcase this album on stage? I mean, you're going to be tired because it requires a lot of dancing.
No, I love it. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, if my mom, till she die, dance every day, oh man, I'm dancing.
That's fantastic.
I can't be on stage without dancing. That's not going to happen.
I wanna live my life easy. I wanna love and live my life. Bami ye. Boy I got to be na. This one go bini so go bini la ye. Oh na di balanso. Eh na di balanso. Oh na di balanso.
And that was the music of Angelique Kidjo there. Angelique was talking to Monocle's Fernanda Augusto Pacheco there. Her album, Hope, with 2 exclamation marks, is out on Friday. Now, that's all the time we have for today's programme. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to the producers Angelica Jobson, Carlotta Rebello and Desiree Bandley. Our researcher was Josephine Astrid Nagla-Gomez and our studio manager was Mariella Bevan, with editing assistance by Jack Dewars. After the headlines, more music on the way. The briefing's live at midday here in London. The Globalist is back at the same time tomorrow. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you very much for listening. Have a great week.